Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with a Travers Spotlight preview on Sierra Leone. Now, before we dive into this particular runner, make sure to press that like button here on YouTube and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel to get all of our great content, whether it's stakes previews, full card analyses, live streams, educational videos, and so much more. Well, listen, the Travers Stakes, the Midsummer Derby, is going to be quite a race this year. The entry of Torpedo Anna against the boys even adds another level of intrigue, but this is a dynamite field of runners that we have this year in the Travers. And let's dive into one of the more prominent horses in this particular field and one who has lofty expectations, and that is Sierra Leone, a horse that has teased with talent, I feel like, so many times, and is starting to get a little bit of a reputation of a horse that just comes up short. Does have some notable wins, which we'll get to in a second, but a horse that is a late running, hard charging type, coming down the lane in the final furlong. And because of that, people, I feel, are drawn to him and assume that he's going to get better the longer they go. There's truth to that, maybe some fallacy in that. We'll talk a little bit about it for this video, but certainly an incredibly talented runner who is well within his capability of winning this race and may end up actually going off as your post-time favorite. It's going to be interesting to see how the wagering public kind of balances Sierra Leone's near misses with a horse like Dornick, let's say, who seems to be under bet sometimes, but consistently shows up and wins these big spots. So a little bit more about Sierra Leone, the type of horse that he is, the connections, etc. So trained by Chad Brown, most notably a turf trainer, but does obviously have a lot of great dirt horses, multiple Preakness Stakes winning trainer. So certainly knows how to win big races on the dirt as well. Jockeyed by Flavien Prat. This was a change that was made a couple of races ago after the Kentucky Derby. They went from Tyler Gaffalione to Flavien Prat. Now, that's not that shocking in all likelihood. Chad Brown's number one jockey is usually Flavien Prat and or Irad Ortiz Jr., one of those two. And so for him to go to Prat for this particular ride, I think, some people made more out of it, I think, than they probably needed to in this spot. But one thing's obvious is that Sierra Leone's issues in terms of lugging in or coming up just short, it's not been a jockey issue. I don't think that any of that was on Tyler. And we've seen some of those issues persist with Flavien Prat aboard the last two times out in the Belmont Stakes and the Jim Dandy. They've been messing around with some of the equipment that Sierra Leone has been using in terms of the bit, trying to give Flavien Prat maybe a little bit more guidance, but sometimes that's counterproductive. So interesting to see. From a pedigree standpoint, horse is absolutely bred for this sort of a race. Sired by Gunrunner, who finished third in this race several years ago when finishing behind Arrogate, who was a runaway winner that year for Bob Baffert. But Gunrunner's become a very prodigious sire in just a very short period of time and is one of your better dirt route sires that you're going to find. Will absolutely appreciate this distance. The Damn Heavenly Sunday is by Malibu Moon. So again, this is a horse that was bred for this type of a race and had lofty expectations from the beginning. Was a $2.3 million sale at the Fasig-Tipton Saratoga sales a couple of years ago. And this one clearly had big expectations from the beginning and has largely come through. This is a horse that remarkably has never missed the board, has always finished in the top three, breaking his maiden in debut at Aqueduct, then going to run second in the Remsen, before then coming and starting to put things together then and seemed like, okay, the Remsen was maybe a little bit of an immature finish. You got by Dornick and then Dornick came back at him. And that turns out to be the type of horse that Dornick just is in general. But Sierra Leone gets the blinkers on next start, wins the Risen Star. I thought maybe his most impressive race to this point was that victory in the Risen Star. Why? Because he's a late running horse, but that Risen Star did not feature much pace at all. And the fact that he was able to close and run everyone down in that race without it being a collapsing pace situation shows that he is not a pace-dependent closer. He can close behind any pace. And I thought that was one of his best efforts. The Bluegrass next time out was another win. But that also featured a really hot pace and a race that was absolutely set up for him, and he dominated. Obviously, we remember that Kentucky Derby finish, so thrilling between Mystic Dan, Sierra Leone, and Forever Young, with Sierra Leone and Forever Young just trading paint like two NASCAR drivers coming down the stretch with each other. And it was interesting. I was just speaking with someone the other day, and they said they were in the paddock, or they were speaking with someone who was in the paddock for the Kentucky Derby. And they said even before the race was run, Sierra Leone and Forever Young were eyeing each other up. And man, when they got onto the track together, they definitely felt like they needed to settle a score. Sierra Leone got just a nose better than Forever Young, but of course finished just a nose behind Mystic Dan. Now, then you figure with second in the Kentucky Derby, he's going to come back in the Belmont, probably is a race that's set up for him, finishes third and kind of runs one of his typical races, lugging in all over the place a little bit in the stretch, and was running against the track that day for sure. There was a lot of speed that was being favored over that surface that weekend. And so for a horse like that to be coming from well off the pace is certainly a challenge, but still managed to get third, and then followed up with a second in the Jim Dandy last time out to Sierra Leone, or to Fierceness, I should say. And that is maybe, in my opinion, maybe his most disappointing effort, actually. I felt like that was a race where he really should have closed that last half furlong and really gotten by Fierceness, who was really taking some short, choppy strides, and he just didn't get past him. And you wonder if he starts to hang a little bit there. But let's talk a little bit more about the past performances. Like I said, this is a horse that likes to come from off the pace. When you look at those running lines, you see a horse that is always well back early in the race and then starts to slowly make up ground, charges at the other horses in those final strides, but really doesn't give himself a lot of room for error. You know, he's not a horse that wins in dominating fashion, like a horse like Fierceness, who we sometimes see win by double-digit lengths and just blows horses out on the front end. He's a horse that even when he wins, as in Sierra Leone, he wins by a nose. He wins by a half a length. He wins by a length and a half. He doesn't win by a huge margin necessarily. So this is something just to keep in mind. Now, we have seen him progressively get better this year in terms of his Beyer speed figures. You know, running a 95 in the Risen Star, 98 in the Bluegrass, then back-to-back 99s in the Derby and Belmont before, 102 in that Jim Dandy. And like I said, the Jim Dandy effort was a little bit more curious, in my opinion. Yes, Fierceness got the perfect trip. And when Fierceness gets the perfect trip, that's usually all he needs to have happen in order to win. But watching that race over and over again, I could not shake the feeling that Sierra Leone hung a little bit there and really should have gotten by Fierceness in that final half furlong. That the strides that Sierra Leone were taking were these big sweeping strides. Meanwhile, Fierceness looks like he's distance compromised at this point and is really starting to shorten up his stride, and yet still couldn't get past him. So, you know, the gallop out of it, I know everybody's going to focus on that to some extent, and certainly Sierra Leone continues to ride well and run well through the gallop out. That was something that former jockey Tyler Gaffleone mentioned in the Risen Star, in fact. He said after that race that Sierra Leone didn't hit his best stride until after the race was over and in the gallop out. So he's a horse that, again, should appreciate every single inch of the distance of the Travers Stakes. So this is what's going to be set up for him. He's a remarkably consistent horse, okay? You look at his career efforts, and there's nothing to suggest that he is going to run a bad race next Saturday at all. This is a horse that is going to run a big race because that's what he does every single time out. He makes his run. The more pace that's in front of him, the better. I know I said he's not pace compromised, and I agree, and I stand by that statement because of what I saw in the Risen Star. That said, he's running against better horses than what he faced in the Risen Star. Okay, that's just the reality. That the horses from the Risen Star were good horses, but he's facing the cream of the crop now in his class. Probably needs maybe a little bit of help with the pace, which he should be able to get. I mean, you would imagine a horse like Unmatched Wisdom, You would imagine fierceness. You would imagine batten down. All three of those horses are going to want to go to the lead. So there should be a honest pace at the very least. It may not be blistering. It might not be nuclear. It might not be like the Kentucky Derby, but there should be some type of a pace for Sierra Leone to run into. As long as he has that, he's going to make his run. The question is, will he get there at the end? And I'll be honest, at the price that he will probably be for this race, I'm not sure I'm interested in betting Sierra Leone to win. He's a horse I obviously would be including in all of my exotics if I'm betting exactas, trifectas, superfectas. He's a must-add in all of those because he's going to make his run. He's just that good. He's absolutely competitive with the rest of this crop, and he's done nothing but show his class every single time out. The concern, again, is I think they're still trying to figure out this horse a little bit. The equipment changed to the different bit 2 races ago. Seems like they might have gone back to the old bit for the last race. He still does have a propensity to lug in coming down the stretch. So if Flavien Prat has to swing this horse wide, it's something to pay attention to of whether or not he comes over and lugs in. Now, I will say he ran much more professionally and much straighter in that Jim Dandy. So maybe that's an element they finally figured out. And certainly that would be a huge bonus if he's not fighting against himself and the track and everybody else in these spots. Now, one of the things I'll say to close out about the track is, to this point in the Saratoga meet, the track has, generally speaking, been playing pretty fair in terms of going 2 turns on the dirt. We've seen 25% of 2-turn dirt winners come from more than 3 lengths back at the half-mile mark. So you can make up ground on this main track going 2 turns on the dirt. It's not as speed favoring, perhaps, as it was during that Belmont Stakes Racing Festival weekend, where he really was up against it, I feel like, in the Belmont Stakes, where he finished 3rd. Listen, he's a classy horse, and he's a horse that when he walks into the paddock really impresses you, physically developed, looks like he's going to enjoy every single step of this particular race. And he's the one who's going to, I think, rise when some others might struggle with this particular distance. Can this be the race where he puts it all together? We've been waiting for it. We think he can do it. But again, at what price are you willing to put on him putting it all together this time out? Because he's going to be one of, if not the favorite, probably the second choice in this race. So fascinating horse, a compelling horse, a thrilling horse to root for and to watch. But man, it's going to be tough to take a short price on a horse that hasn't gotten it done the last few times out. All right. Well, listen, that's going to do it for this Travers Spotlight video on Sierra Leone. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button on NYRA Bets YouTube. My name is Matthew DeSantis. Wish you a great and prosperous day at the races, friends. And reminding you, it's now post time.